Imagine waking up in a world where the idea of having a job had never even been invented. No alarm interrupts your sleep. No glowing screen demands your attention. No meetings waiting for you. No boss expecting you to arrive. You open your eyes, stretch, look around, and ask yourself only one question. What do I feel like doing today? For almost 300,000 years, this wasn't a fantasy. It was simply another morning. For nearly 99% of human history, nobody had a job. There were no careers, no salaries, no promotions, no weekends because there were no weekdays. And yet somehow our ancestors survived, raised families, created art, invented music, and built the foundations of everything we call civilization. So, what did ancient humans actually do all day before jobs existed? Let's begin with something surprising. The average modern person will spend roughly 90,000 hours working during their lifetime. Nearly one-third of your waking life belongs to someone else. For our ancestors, that number was almost unimaginable. The closest answer comes from one of the most influential anthropological studies ever conducted. In 1963, archaeologist Richard Lee spent years living among the Jew/Hawanzi people of Botswana, one of the last hunter-gatherer societies whose lifestyle closely resembles that of prehistoric humans. He carefully recorded how they spent every day. The results shocked researchers. Adults spent only about 15 to 20 hours each week obtaining food. That's roughly 2.5 days. Everything else belonged to them, and this wasn't unique. Anthropologists found remarkably similar patterns among the Hadza of Tanzania, the Ache of Paraguay, and the Martu people of Australia. Different continents, different climates, different cultures. The same conclusion appeared again and again. Hunter-gatherers usually spent far less time securing food than most modern people spend sitting in an office. Naturally, this raises an obvious question. How do we know prehistoric humans lived the same way? After all, these people are alive today. The answer lies underground, in ancient bones. When archaeologists compare the skeletons of hunter-gatherers with those of the earliest farmers, the contrast is impossible to ignore. The hunter-gatherers were generally taller. Their bones were stronger. Their joints showed fewer signs of repetitive strain. Their teeth were healthier, with far fewer cavities. Early farmers tell a very different story. They became shorter. Malnutrition became common. Their grain-heavy diets damaged their teeth. Their spines carried the scars of endless repetitive labor. Many died younger. Their skeletons reveal something unexpected. Agriculture did not immediately make life easier. For thousands of years, it made life harder. But perhaps the strongest evidence comes from something that should barely exist if every waking hour had been devoted to survival. Art. Around 30,000 years ago, someone walked deep into what we now call Chauvet Cave in southern France. With only the flickering light of a fire, they spent hours painting horses, lions, rhinoceroses, and mammoths across the cave walls. Not crude sketches, masterpieces filled with movement, perspective, and astonishing realism. None of it helped them hunt. None of it made them safer. Someone simply decided that creating beauty was worth spending an entire day doing. Then there are the shell beads discovered in Blombos Cave in South Africa. They are around 100,000 years old. Tiny holes were carefully drilled into each shell so they could be worn as jewelry. The nearest coastline was nearly 20 kilometers away. Someone willingly walked roughly 40 kilometers just to collect beautiful shells. Later, they spent hours shaping each one, not because they had to, because they wanted to. Then came music. In Germany, archaeologists uncovered a 40,000-year-old flute carved from the wing bone of a vulture. 5 perfectly placed finger holes. Someone understood rhythm. Someone understood melody. Someone spent precious time making music instead of making weapons. These discoveries are not isolated. Across Europe, Africa, and Asia, archaeologists continue finding decorated tools, carved figurines, engraved bones, painted objects, ornaments, and artworks that required incredible patience. They tell us something fascinating. When ancient humans weren't gathering food, they filled empty hours with curiosity instead of obligation, beauty instead of efficiency, creativity instead of deadlines. So what would an ordinary day actually look like? Imagine waking just before sunrise. The fire from the previous night still glows beneath a layer of ash. Someone quietly adds another piece of wood. Breakfast is simple. Perhaps roasted meat from yesterday's hunt, maybe fish, maybe berries, nuts, or roots collected earlier. Nobody rushes. Nobody checks the time. The morning is filled with conversation. Plans form naturally. A small group may decide to hunt. Others might gather edible plants. Some stay behind. If yesterday's hunt was successful, perhaps nobody needs to leave camp at all. Instead, someone sharpens a spear. Another repairs a basket. Someone softens animal hides into clothing. Children imitate adults while turning everything into a game. None of this feels like work. There is no clock counting the minutes, no supervisor judging performance. Skill itself is rewarding. Being useful earns respect. Creating something well is satisfying. When a hunt does happen, it rarely resembles the dramatic chases shown in movies. Humans are persistence hunters. Rather than sprinting after prey, they move at a steady pace for hours. Animals eventually overheat because they cannot cool themselves efficiently while running. Humans can sweat. We regulate our body temperature better than almost every other mammal. Eventually, the exhausted animal slows down. The hunters don't overpower it with speed. They simply outlast it. The entire hunt may take several hours. Afterward, everyone shares the food. By early afternoon, most of the essential tasks are already finished. This is where modern life becomes difficult to compare. Because much of the remaining day has no obvious purpose. People sit together beneath the shade. They laugh. They tell stories. Parents play with children. Friends groom one another's hair. Some carve patterns into bone. Others make necklaces from shells or animal teeth. Someone experiments with a new tool. Someone else simply watches the clouds drift overhead. Anthropologist James Sussman found that among modern hunter-gatherers, adults often spend around 6 hours every day simply being together, talking, laughing, arguing, sharing memories. In a world without governments, contracts, or banks, relationships were your insurance policy. If people trusted you, they shared food when your hunt failed. If they respected you, they protected your children. Your community was your survival. As evening arrives, everything changes. The fire grows brighter. The stars slowly appear. Conversations shift. Anthropologist Polly Wiesner analyzed hundreds of hours of conversations among the Yu/Huansi. During the day, people mostly discussed practical matters, animal tracks, food, water, small disagreements. But after sunset, more than 80% of conversations became stories. Myths, legends, ancestors as heroes, spirits, impossible creatures. This may have been where human culture truly came alive. Around those fires, our ancestors didn't simply pass the time. They passed ideas, knowledge, values, identity. Even sleep looked different. Before electricity, many humans naturally slept in two separate phases. They slept for several hours after sunset, awoke for an hour or two during the middle of the night, talked quietly, reflected, prayed, added wood to the fire. Sometimes even visited neighbors. Then they returned to sleep until dawn. For thousands of years, this was completely normal. Then around 10,000 years ago, everything changed. People in the Fertile Crescent began planting seeds. They domesticated animals. At first, agriculture seemed like an incredible advantage. Agriculture solved one problem, then quietly created another. Every successful harvest demanded a little more land, a little more labor, and a little less freedom. More food allowed more children to survive. More children required more farmland. More farmland demanded more labor. Within only a few generations, there was no going back. Entire communities became tied to fields. Work became seasonal, then constant, then unavoidable. Population exploded. Villages became cities. Cities required specialists, potters, blacksmiths, builders, soldiers, priests, administrators. Eventually, jobs were born. For the first time in human history, your time belonged to someone else in exchange for resources. Today, most of us spend decades working toward retirement. Our ancestors spent most of their lives already living the kind of freedom many people hope to experience only at the very end. We struggled to find time for music. They made music because time existed. We schedule vacations to escape work. They simply rested when the day allowed it. We chase promotions, wealth, and status. They invested in friendships because relationships determine survival. We often believe productivity gives life meaning. Our ancestors may have believed meaning came first, and productivity simply followed. Perhaps civilization gave us comfort. Perhaps it gave us medicine, technology, and longer lives. But it also quietly asked for something in return, our time. And maybe that's why this question feels so unsettling. Maybe the biggest mystery isn't how ancient humans lived. Maybe it's why we became so convinced that constant work is the natural way to live. The real mystery is whether we've forgotten what humans were doing for almost all of our history.